This is One Sentence News, a daily podcast featuring 3 news stories with a sentence-long summary and 1 sentence of context apiece. I'm Colin Wright. This is a sponsored message. I've been using Anchor as my podcast host for a while now, and it's been a pleasure to use. Anchor offers benefits that most other hosts do not. It's free to use, but it also has a collection of tools that allow you to create a podcast completely within the Anchor website or smartphone app. They distribute your show to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other distribution channels without any additional effort on your part, and you can make money from your podcast without any minimum audience size. So you can use it as a more traditional podcast host like I do, but it's also got everything you need to start a podcast from scratch. If you're keen to give it a shot, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. It's Monday, October 10th, 2022. Let's talk about the news. From the New York Times, blast on Crimean bridge deals blow to Russian war effort in Ukraine. The Kerch Strait Bridge, which connects Russia to Russian-occupied Crimea, has suffered a large explosion, which has taken out one side of a highway and a portion of a parallel railroad bridge. Traffic has resumed over the undamaged portions of both train and highway bridges, and no one has officially claimed responsibility for the blast, but it's generally understood it was probably a Ukrainian operation. This is being seen as newsworthy because this bridge, which was built in 2018, connects a piece of Ukrainian territory that Russian forces occupied back in 2014 to the Russian mainland, and it was celebrated as an engineering marvel stretching 12 miles, which is about 19 1/3 kilometers, over water. Also because the bridge has become symbolic of Russia's domination in the area, and in part because the bridge is vital to getting military hardware and civilian necessities from Russia to Crimea, which will be even more important as we segue into the winter. From BBC News, Iranian state-run live TV hacked by protesters. Protests continue across Iran following the death of a 22-year-old woman who was in the custody of the country's morality police in mid-September for apparently not wearing her headscarf correctly. And among those protests is a recent hack of Iran's state-run live TV channel by a group calling itself Ali's Justice, which showed someone wearing a variation of the Guy Fawkes mask often used by the hacker group Anonymous, and an image of the country's supreme leader with flames around him and a gun sight target on his head. In-person protests continue as well, including more traditional protests in the streets, in classrooms, and elsewhere, which seem to typically involve chanting anti-government slogans, women removing their legally required headscarves, and sometimes cutting their hair, and in some cases fighting with security forces, who have several times been caught on video shooting live rounds at students and other protesters. In some cases, the protests are a little more asymmetric, though, as with a project by a local artist who is going around to fountains in culturally significant parts of Tehran and dyeing the water red to represent the blood being spilled by the government. And from the Associated Press, Haiti's leader requests foreign armed forces to quell chaos. Haiti's prime minister has been authorized by the country's government to request, quote, the immediate deployment of a specialized armed force in sufficient quantity, end quote, to handle a crisis that is partly being caused by powerful armed gangs that have blocked ports and fuel terminals at the capital, staunching the flow of supplies around the country, including fuel, food, and medical supplies. Protesters who began to block roads following the government's announcement that they would no longer be subsidizing fuel because they could no longer afford to do so are also contributing to the nation's problems. But many inside and outside the country have questioned whether sending more foreign troops and weapons into an already volatile situation is a smart solution, as external forces and the import of gobs of weapons are generally seen as the causes of most of the problems Haiti is facing right now. If you're finding some value in One Sentence News, consider leaving a quick review wherever you get your podcasts and/or sharing the show with a friend. You can find out more about this show or subscribe to the email version at onesentencenews.com. And you can support this and other related projects, like the Let's Know Things and Brain Lenses podcasts, at understandery.com.